The ground was shaking before I even reached the canyon, and I knew something was being thrown away. I had climbed down into the bone pit before, always for scrap metal or old bones I could sell, never expecting to hear a sound like that. A thin, cracking cry, rising up from between two broken rocks. I froze at the edge of the cliff, my boots sliding on loose stone, my heart pounding harder than it should for a simple scavenging run. Dragons do not cry like that unless they are dying. I slid down the last stretch of rock and found her curled in the dirt, barely bigger than my forearm, her scales a dull gray instead of the proud gold and crimson of her clutch siblings. One wing was folded wrong. Her breath came out in short, weak puffs, no fire, not even smoke. Around her, I could see the tracks of larger dragons, and claw marks where the clutch mother had pushed her out of the nest without a second glance. I had heard about this before. Every dragon season, the weakest hatchlings were left behind in the bone pit to die, because dragon society believed that strength was everything, and weakness was a waste of food and time. I always thought it was just an ugly story people told. Looking at her now, shivering and starving, I understood it was real. I should have turned around. Humans were barely tolerated on this world as it was, seen as clever but fragile creatures who did not deserve to touch something as sacred as a dragon egg, let alone raise one. If the elders found out what I was about to do, it would not go well for me. But I looked into her eyes, and I saw something I recognized. I had spent my whole life being told I was too slow, too soft, not built for the kind of world my own people valued. I was the one who got left behind on assignments, forgotten in meetings, overlooked for promotions, no matter how hard I worked. Nobody had ever placed a bet on me either. So I picked her up, wrapped her in my jacket, and carried her home. My name is Owen Hartley, and this is the story of how a hatchling nobody wanted became something no one on this planet could ignore. The first few weeks were the hardest. She could barely eat solid food, so I ground up proteins into a paste and fed her through a tube I built from spare tubing in my workshop. Her wing had healed wrong, twisted at an angle that would never let her fly the way other dragons did. I did not have money for advanced treatments, so I built a lightweight brace instead, adjusting it night after night until it fit her properly. I named her Wren, because despite everything, she reminded me of a small bird that refused to stop singing. Word got around fast in the settlement. Dragonkind considered it an insult that a human had taken a discarded hatchling and was trying to raise her like she mattered. The local trader, a sharp-tongued woman named Ingrid Voss, told me directly that I was wasting my life on a lost cause. Even some of my own people thought I was foolish, spending my savings on a creature that would probably never grow past infancy. I ignored all of it. I had nothing else pulling at me anyway, no family waiting, no career climbing higher without me. Wren became the reason I woke up each morning. By the time she was old enough to test her wings, it was clear she would never fly like the others. Her injured wings simply could not generate the same lift. Any dragon born like this would have been considered finished, done, not worth continued care. But I had spent years working with old aircraft engines before I ever came to this world, and an idea started forming in my head. I built her a set of lightweight wing extensions, thin panels of a flexible alloy that could catch air the way her natural wing no longer could on its own. It took 3 failed designs and countless nights of testing before the 4th version worked. The first time she lifted off the ground and stayed airborne for more than a few seconds, I laughed so hard I nearly fell over. Wren screeched with something that sounded suspiciously like joy. As she grew, her flame remained weak too, barely a flicker compared to the roaring blasts other young dragons could already produce. Dragon society measured worth heavily by flame strength, and hers alone would have marked her as worthless in their eyes. So again, I adapted. I studied the mineral deposits in the region and found a rare compound that, when mixed carefully into her food, boosted the chemical reaction inside her flame glands. It would never make her flame the strongest, but it made it sharper, more precise, more controllable than the wide, wasteful bursts other dragons produced. I did not try to make her stronger in the ways dragons valued strength. I tried to make her better in ways nobody had thought to try. The dragon elders eventually summoned me. Their leader, an ancient dragon named Caldrek, looked down at me with clear disapproval as Wren stood nervously at my side, now the size of a large dog, still far smaller than dragons her age should have been. Caldrek told me plainly that what I was doing went against nature and tradition. Weak blood should not be forced to survive. It weakens the whole bloodline, he said, and it insults the memory of every strong dragon who had earned their place through true strength. I told him that strength was not the only thing worth valuing, and that maybe tradition was wrong about what makes a creature worthy. He was not pleased with my answer, but he did not stop me either, Dragon law apparently allowed a human enough foolishness to ruin themselves if they chose to. Word of the strange, small dragon raised by a human spread through neighboring settlements. Most treated it as a joke. A dragon with a bent wing and thin flame, kept alive by tubes and machines, hardly seemed like a threat or an achievement. I let them talk. Ren and I trained every single day, testing new combinations of her artificial wings, testing new patterns for her flame, and most importantly, testing new ways of fighting that did not depend on raw power at all. I had grown up watching old recordings of human combat sports back on Earth, sports where smaller fighters used leverage, timing, and quick thinking to defeat much larger opponents. I began teaching Ren the same principles. She could not outmuscle a full-grown dragon, but she could outmaneuver one. Her small size, once seen as a weakness, made her fast and hard to hit. Her precise flame, once mocked as feeble, could hit a single point with accuracy no wide-blasting dragon could match. 2 years passed. Ren grew into her strange, unconventional shape. She was still smaller than every dragon her age, her wings still a mix of natural scale and metal alloy, her flame still a narrow blue line instead of a roaring orange wave. But she was fast, sharp, and clever, everything her bloodline had said she could never be. Then the trial came. Every few years, the settlement held a gathering called the Proving, where young dragons demonstrated their strength in front of the elders and earned their place in dragon society. It was considered an honor few outsiders were ever allowed to witness, let alone participate in. When I asked permission for Ren to compete, the elders laughed. Caldric allowed it only because he expected it to prove his point about weak bloodlines once and for all. Ren's opponent was Draven, one of the strongest dragons from her original clutch, the very hatchling who had likely pushed her out of the nest all those years ago. Draven had grown into an enormous, golden-scaled beast, admired across every settlement for his raw power and flawless wings. The moment the trial began, the difference in size was obvious to everyone watching. Draven roared, and the sound alone rattled loose stones from the canyon walls. Ren stood small and quiet beside me, her artificial wings folded neatly, her expression calm. I had told her the same thing every night before we trained. You do not need to be the biggest. You need to be the smartest one in the arena. Draven charged first, expecting a quick and easy victory. Ren waited until the last possible moment, then darted sideways with a speed no dragon his size could match. He crashed past her, confused, and before he could turn, she released a narrow line of blue flame directly at the joint of his wing, a precise, controlled strike that caused no lasting harm but forced him to stumble and lose his footing. The crowd went silent. Draven tried again and again, each time overwhelming in raw strength but always a half-second too slow. Ren moved like water, weaving around his attacks, using her small size and quick reflexes to outmaneuver him at every turn. Her flame never once matched his in size, but it never needed to. Every strike landed exactly where she wanted it, forcing him back step by step, wearing down his confidence far more than his strength. By the final stretch of the trial, Draven was exhausted, frustrated, and unable to land a single meaningful hit. Ren, barely breathing hard, finished the match with a final precise burst of flame that grazed harmlessly across his front leg, a clear signal of victory under the rules of the trial. The canyon fell into stunned silence. Caldric stepped forward slowly, staring at Ren with an expression I had never seen on his face before, something between disbelief and quiet respect. He admitted, in front of every dragon and human gathered there, that he had been wrong. Strength, he said, was not only measured in size or flame, but in the will to adapt, and in finding a way to survive when the world says you should not. From that day forward, dragon parents no longer left the smallest hatchlings behind without a second thought. Some, at least, began asking whether there was another way, a better way, inspired by the story of a discarded runt who became something the whole world eventually respected. Ren became known across every settlement, not as the weakest dragon of her clutch, but as the one who proved that being different was not the same as being worthless. As for me, I kept doing exactly what I had always done, refusing to give up on something everyone else had already written off. People still called me foolish sometimes, but I did not mind anymore. I had seen firsthand what happens when someone finally gets the chance nobody thought they deserved. Ren flew beside me that night, her metal-lined wings catching the moonlight, her blue flame flickering steadily against the dark sky. She was never the strongest dragon born that season. She simply became the one nobody could forget.